Wonderful Lucia Diorio. Are you there, Lucia?
Yes, I'm there. Bonjour, Jérôme.
Lucia. Okay, are you ready?
Okay, I try to. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
good.
We
So
see you and we will see your
I try
screen
to
soon.
share the screen.
Share the screen and don't forget to share the sound.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay, so Lucia is going to talk about the biogeography of fish sounds.
What
Let's
do you
get
see?
started. Your screen.
You see the whole.
A wonderful picture.
Okay, great. Paul Klee.
Okay.
Hello everyone, and I want to thank you, the organizing committee, for this very interesting conference. So today, I don't see if you see my screen behind. We're going to dive into this beautiful Mediterranean habitat, and I'm going to talk also about biogeography, but this time on fish sounds and how the habitat influences acoustic communities. So marine ecosystems provide almost $7 billion of ecosystem services to humans. And they face degradation like terrestrial environments, but it's often less visible. So protecting and tracking biodiversity and habitat functionality is a priority for conservation, but it's quite challenging because marine environments are often difficult to access and diving times are reduced because of great depth. So the information that we can gather is often very limited and punctual. So we all know here the great potential of ecoacoustics to study environments. And what we see here, this is a typical temperate soundscape of a rich Mediterranean coastal environment, which is definitely not as sexy as a rich terrestrial soundscapes. So what do we see in this marine soundscape? But most of these biological sounds are snaps from invertebrates. And down there, in this little band here, it below 2 kilohertz, actually even below 1 kilohertz, are fish sounds. So fish sounds are quite diverse. So used for communication, they are species specific. They reflect behaviors and sex, and they indicate reproductive activities and functional sites, such as spawning sites, as Magda Picciolin pointed out yesterday. And they can also respond to human impact as their behaviors. And diversity in acoustic community is related to taxonomic diversity. So these are important elements for the study of fish assemblages. Fish acoustic communities, so their composition and their drivers, may in fact provide new insights into aspects that are critical for conservation. And this is important because fish assemblages are critical contributors to marine ecosystem functions, goods, and services. And fish diversity and biomass is dramatically decreasing, and changes in fish community cause changes in functioning of food webs, and they also reduce the resilience of populations. So as Susan Fuller said yesterday and Marta Bolgan 2 days ago, it is not only a matter of how many species there are. Characterizing fish communities and monitoring the integrity of their structure is of paramount importance. So but first of all, we have to characterize the acoustic biodiversity and ask the following questions. So what are the habitat drivers of this acoustic biodiversity, and can acoustic biodiversity reflect environmental status or protection? So to try to answer this first question, we used sounds from the Calm Acoustic Monitoring Network of the French Mediterranean Water Agency. I feel very lucky to be one of the PIs of this monitoring program that is managed by the Chorus Institute. So we recorded in coralligenous reefs. So coralligenous reefs, you can see it here, are Mediterranean hotspots of biodiversity. It's the second most important biodiversity hotspot of the Med Sea. And it's also a special zone of conservation that is protected by various directives. So for this study, I used sound recordings collected in June over 3 years from 27 coralligenous reefs across the northwestern Mediterranean. And I associated them to habitat data from the RECOR program, which is also a program of the Water Agency that is managed by Andromède Oceanology. And so we extracted 17 habitat variables. I'm not going into detail, but 6 of them were the most influential ones. We defined them using a model building process. So there was crevice percent of living fixed organism, percent of coralligenous outcrops of rocky substrate, number of biocenosis, and recording depth. These were the most influential ones. An adapted dichotomic approach was used to describe that we described in our first paper on fish communities that characterizes sometimes based on acoustic features only. And so we could obtain like a library of the various potential fish sound categories. And we applied community ecology principles to assess the relationships between habitat features and fish acoustic communities. So what we found was that coralligenous reefs were very rich in sounds. So we found 28 sound type categories, which is up to 5 times more than observed in other Mediterranean habitats so far. And so there were some sounds that were very, very abundant, and most of the other sounds were not abundant, so pretty rare. And if you look at their occurrence over the 27 sites, we can identify some ubiquitous sounds, so sound types that are present on all sites, or basically all the sites, like over 80% of the sites, we could find sounds from groupers and Ophidian roquet. So these sounds here, they can be considered as generalists across Mediterranean coralligenous reefs. And the most abundant ones were Ophidian roquet and Chenna umbra. As Marta said yesterday, Ophidian roquet, you don't see that little animal, but it's simply everywhere. And acoustic diversity also differed between geographical regions. So what we see in these acoustic maps is the 27 sites are the bars, the different colors are the different sound types, and down here are the 3 different regions of the northwestern French Mediterranean. And this one is with relative abundance, and this is exactly the same image, but it's the logarithmic. We use the logarithmic values to better see the rarer sounds. And so this really gives you an acoustic mapping, an acoustic biogeography map of the sound of fish. And what we can also see is that all the sites were quite rich, and that there are some differences in the regions, with especially Corsica showing a few sound types that were more abundant and more present compared to other sides. So this kind of maps really highlights regional differences, can highlight the regional differences. So, and the main determinants of sound type composition were depth and percent of coralligenous cover. This suggests that fish acoustic communities exhibit bathymetric stratification and are related to benthic reef assemblages. And what was also interesting was that some fish sound types, this one down here, so some upsweeping sounds and some pulse series, were also strongly related to the presence of ecosystem engineers like red coral or gorgonians, which are key players in maintaining habitat function. And also a multivariate analysis revealed that acoustic communities can reflect different environmental states. And it's also seen in the acoustic richness that was more significant in good compared to rather poor coralligenous reefs. So this suggests that fish assemblages are affected by the condition also of the fixed fauna of coralligenous reefs. So overall, coralligenous reefs seem to be acoustic hotspots in the Mediterranean, sounds from top predators were among the most abundant ones, and most of those sounds were reproductive sounds. And there are some sounds that seem to be related to ecosystem engineers, and acoustic communities were mainly driven by deaths and the percent of coral reefs. And also habitat conditions influenced fish community composition. So this kind of analysis can bring new insights on the correlates of biogeographical patterns of fish biodiversity, especially if you do it over time, and would be better over longer time periods. So now what about environmental protection levels? So now we travel to Sardinia, to the beautiful marine protected area of Tavolara Punta Codacavallo. And we recorded here for a week in a marine protected area in rocky reefs, and for a week in 4 sites simultaneously. And 2 of the recording sites were in the fully protected zone, and 2 of the recording sites were in partial protected zones, which means that full protection means no access and no fishing. And partial protection zones means you can access, you can dive, you can have many activities, and fishing is regulated. So again, we applied the same approach to get acoustic diversity of fish sounds. And we performed Termanova to explore the correlates between acoustic communities and protection levels. And we can see that there are clear differences between the communities of full protection zones compared to the ones of partial protection zones. And this was highly significant. And these differences were quantified with the meta-analysis. And what we see here, these are the species. This is partial protection, full protection, and that some sound types were clearly more related to the full protection status, and others were more related to partial protection status, like Ophidion rocae. And among the ones that were only present in fully protected areas were the sounds from these 2 species, the grouper and the brown meager, that are paramount for structuring populations of lower trophic levels. And they are also known to show the greatest positive responses to protection from fishing. So acoustic diversity reflects definitely protection levels in this case, and there seem to be some sound types that are indicative of reserve effect, that this should be further investigated. And high-level predators prevail in full protection zones, at least 2 of them. And fish of low commercial value, such as Ophidion rocae, are poorly affected. However, this is still highly speculative. We are now working on looking at the impact of fishing pressure on communities. So overall, what we could say is that by looking at communities, we can get insights into multiple aspects that are critical for conservation. So on the one hand, we have biodiversity, environmental status, but most importantly, maybe, is the functional aspects of communities, such as the presence of reproductive sites, of spawning sites, the stability of community and trophic structures, and also habitat functionality. So this is important because it's the main focus of modern conservation ecology. However, there is still a very long way to go to get there. And one of the reasons is also that we need to replicate these studies in more MPAs. We personally got now data from 3 additional MPAs to see if there are general patterns that are indicative of protection levels. We need to combine more punctual data sampling, providing these nice biogeographic acoustic maps with long-term recordings. So to look at the shifts, we need to know the natural variability, and to do that, we need long-term recordings. And most of all, we need to know who produces these sounds. So the source of most sounds remain still unknown. So from all the sound times that this 28 and year 14 sound types, we identified, we know the ones of only 4 species. So we still keep discovering new sounds. So every time I open up a new recordings, there are new sounds. So we are still exploring in the marine environment, and often we do not know what to expect. So, but this is my very personal opinion, we have to be very careful in applying fully automatic processing tools without knowing the data. But we're going to be, well, I hope we will manage some time. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and especially thank my collaborators and co-authors and colleagues. And also remind you that there is going to be a special issue in the Journal of Marine Science and Engineering on fish acoustic communities. There's still a little bit of time to submit. So those who work on fish acoustics, you're welcome to submit your paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Just on time. So you can ask many questions in any language to Lucia. She will manage. No, you have questions already in the chat. Lucia, are you looking at functional traits among the fish species that are acoustically active? Let's talk about expanding your samples to tropical preserves in the Brazilian Northeast. This comes from Renata.
Renata, hello. Hello. Well, yes, that's something that we want to do. The problem is that, as I said, we don't know the sources of most of those sounds. So we can do it for some of them. And right now, well, now I work at the University of Perpignan with a professor who is specialized in fish ecology, and we're combining different ways to try to find out who is producing the sound. So he's tagging animals to look at how they move, and so we try to combine the tags and triangulate the tags and try to find out, well, the sound of these animals. The problem is that often, at least in the Mediterranean, what I found out, but I'm not a specialist, is that if you record animals in the aquarium, often they don't produce any sounds, or very rarely. And in situ, it's very difficult. And Marta Bolgan can tell you, because we tried to find for 3 years who was producing the qua sound, which is a sound that is everywhere in all Mediterranean meadows. It took us 3 years to find it. And Marta and Eric, they managed to find that it was Scorpionides. So yes, it's very important and we want to do it, but the number of animals that we know and from which we can take these functional traits is not big yet.
Actually, you face exactly the same issues than Jack for ponds, animals, ponds acoustics, where you don't know who is doing what. So really a challenge. Any other question? Because the question from Luan has been treated actually. It was the identification of sonotypes. Are there other questions for Lucia? I have a question actually. How do you manage all these recording sites? How can you be in all these sites?
This is, well, okay. Well, I have to say that these sites, they are recorded really punctually for 24, 48 hours max, because we have to stay within the same months to avoid seasonal effects. Yes. So these are really punctual recordings. So it doesn't take a lot of time to analyze, to go through them. And I personally use some automatic tools, but to detect mainly where the fish sounds are. And after that, it's more manual sort of classification. So that helps to be a bit faster, but we definitely need we need better processing tools for fish sounds, and we're now with a working group. We try to build an open library of marine sounds. It's ongoing, so we hope that can help also for people that want to test some processing tools, and that may help the marine community.
Yes, Camille asked something which is more or less related to what you said. I agree that we should be careful with the application of automatic detection methods to soundscape with a lot of unknown sounds. But what is your approach to analyzing such big data sets? So yeah, it's more
As I said, I'm basically we'll have two fish detectors. One is based on wavelets, and another one is based on rhythm. And
Yes.
so the good thing about I personally use more the one that is rated on rhythm because it takes less time, a little bit less time, and because it's very open. So you can regulate it in a way that it really captures many different sounds, and it's not very specific. You can regulate it so that it's very specific. Like I want to look only, I only want to fashion umbra sounds. So you can regulate the parameters to find only these sounds, but you can also regulate them to find other ones. And based on that one, we go through the diversity. But it's a big work. It's still a big work, but the problem is we still don't know what there is. And what I noticed from like the experience that I have now is that the rare sounds are the ones that make the diversity. So if we miss them, we miss a lot.
Yes. Okay, it's fantastic because you have plenty of things to do.
Yes.
Plenty of work. So,
you can join me, Jerome.
I don't go on a boat. Never. Okay, thank you, Lucia. We are on time, so we need to go to the next speaker.